Hello, everyone. I'm so glad you joined us today on Autumn is Here. Today, we have an interesting story. We're going to talk to a storyteller. Yes, I'm going to interview a storyteller. I know you're saying, why are you interviewing a storyteller? What does that have to do with your program? But you know what she does? She goes around and she speaks to older adults and she gets their story. You know, sometimes when someone passes away and when they pass away, all the memories pass away with them, all the history passes away with them. This is what she does. She goes and she talks to them, and then they're able to share their story, their history, the things that they contributed, how their life was as they grew up. And it not only helps their loved ones and their family members understand them and understand what they've gone through, but it also allows them to feel like they still have something to contribute. They still have a story that's important. So it's wonderful that she does that. So we're going to talk to her. And also, she's a caregiver. So we're going to speak to her today. She's going to share her story and share her professional storytelling business with us. Autumn is here. Hello, everyone. This is Francine. Welcome again to Autumn is Here. I'm so glad that you're here today to tune in today. Today, we were going to speak to Cyndi Freeman, and she has a very interesting company. It's called The Common Thread. And she speaks to people about telling their stories and sharing their stories, and older people to share their stories with other people. And it's very interesting. And she's also a caregiver. So please welcome her to the show. Welcome, Cyndi. How are you today?
I am doing great, and it's been a long time for us getting together for this.
Yeah.
For those who are listening, we kept on trying to schedule it, but as a caregiver, I kept on being pulled aside from emergencies with my mother, who has turned 100 this year.
Oh, blessings. Wow.
I know. I can have
Great.
a conversation with my 100-year-old mother. How blessed am I?
That is blessing. Yes, yes. First, give me some information about The Common Thread. It's such an interesting title. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, it's my husband and I. It's our company together. We call it The Common Thread because it is our stories that are the common thread that sort of weave us and connect us and bring us together. And the one thing all humans have in common is our stories. So the story is the common thread. It is an organization primarily dedicated to storytelling and collecting oral histories. We also teach classes, so we do corporate storytelling as well, but I think that's something aside from what we're doing today. So the common thread, we focus on collecting stories because stories are your legacy, is our belief. And once you are gone, those stories, unless you have shared them and collected them, they are gone too. There was this wonderful article that somebody shared with me after seeing what I was doing that nailed it. It was the New York Times was talking about young people, if they know their family stories, they do better. If they know the resilience of, where they came from, who they came from, the stories of successes and the stories of failures and the resilience and a sense of what drove people, they just have a better sense as young people of who they are. Even before they know who they are, they know the grit from which they come. And I think that that's very true. So it's collecting stories from families and being able to share them are great. We also work with, right now we're doing a really wonderful project with the Irish Art Center, which is this incredible organization that was built out of civil rights movement and suddenly sort of moved off into, if we're going to support Irish civil rights, why? Because the culture is so amazing. And they became the Irish Art Center, sort of like celebrating the culture. But the stories of why they started, who they were, are amazing. And the founders and the original members are now, some have passed, some are in their late 80s. So now is the time to get those stories so that people can really understand why this organization was created. So it's actually really exciting. The stories we hear are incredible. But how I got into this is actually key. I come from a family that doesn't share stories.
Oh, okay.
And it would drive me crazy. I remember I must have been about 16, and I'm visiting my grandma at a nursing home, and I'm like, Grandma, tell me some stories. And my grandmother was like, I don't want to bore you.
Oh, really?
And she would never have bored me. I was a kind of a kid who loved watching TV programs, and I was an actress, and like it was all about stories. And my mother finally said, Mom, tell her about when you were a little kid. in the brownstone with the neighbor upstairs. And then my grandmother went, oh, yeah, when I was memories from when I was maybe 5. So it would have been turn of the century because she was born in the 1890s. She said, I remember being a little kid. We lived in a brownstone in Boston. It was my family on the first floor, an Italian family on the third floor, and my mother and the Italian lady were best friends, but they didn't share a language in common. She said, my mother spoke Yiddish, she spoke Italian. That lady would come tearing down the stairs, and my mother would hear her and open the door, and she maybe sometimes would fall into her arms crying, and my mother would sit there and rub her hand and comfort her and make her a glass of tea, and vice versa. Good news, bad news, my mother would go upstairs, and my son, he graduated high school, and start dancing around, and the woman would see she's happy, and they'd celebrate with a cup of coffee and a Danish, and she said they didn't need a language in common. My mother called it language of the heart. She said, we're immigrant mothers in America. We understand each other. Mm-hmm. And that is the only story my grandmother ever told me. Mm-hmm. You know, and it's a kind of thing, it was such a beautiful, beautiful story. But somewhere along the line, she got the impression she was boring or her stories were not important. And so she lived to 96 years, and that is the only story I have. And all the rest, having got married in 1918, I've heard how she met my grandfather through my brother, who heard it from my grandfather. But it's like I never got these stories from her. And so I know what our family has lost. And we have photos all over the walls of people who were clearly loved and cared about, but I don't really know who they are. And so
they get older. Sometimes when people get older, they don't feel important. So they like you want to hear it or it's old and and just dismiss it, and it's really important to tell because, it tells you about where you came from and how your family began and engaged, Yeah.
Yeah. So that was sort of the inspiration. I first started working with a program called Sukasa, which is, I'm a storyteller and an artist and a comedian. And Sukasa was an artist in residency in senior centers throughout Brooklyn. And so I started working there. And then as my mother got older, because I would get a grant and we would run a long storytelling project. It was a 6-month commitment, meeting every week. And as my mom got older, she needed more of my attention. So I've stopped, at least for now, applying for that grant. But the last center that I worked with was in 2018. I still volunteer with them once a month and go in there and run a story circle where we just either share a story on a theme or go around the room and tell us something you're looking forward to. Or, if you don't want to share, say pass. It's no fun to tell a story if people aren't listening. So be the listening ears. But it's, getting older is hard. And people have health issues. Almost everybody there has some form of health issues. Older people, pass. And so they're sad and they're grieving a loss of a loved one or a loss of a friend. And we create a circle where it's all about celebrating life's moments. And it's not the time to talk about the prescription that you couldn't get or the confusing call you got from your doctor or the frustration with the bus. This is the time to talk about, the wonderful birthday party your daughter and, planned for you, or the fact that there's a new grandkid on the way, or how I met my husband, or, stories like that.
How has that helped them? What changes do you see in the people that you get the stories from or the groups that you work with? How has that helped them?
It's the energy in the room bubbles. And it just creates good vibes. And, with my mom, who now has dementia, she was only recently diagnosed within the last year. So it's like new for us. Something that was told to us is that with cognitive decline and dementia, people don't always remember everything, but endorphins are real and it's chemical. And so giving people joyful moments and joyful experiences, whether it be as something as simple as a favorite cookie or a chance to laugh with people, whether they remember that experience later in the day or tomorrow or not, the endorphins created continue. So the whole goal is to get people laughing and giggling and saying, oh, that happened to me, or can I tell you about my dad? And, one of the stories recently was just dad died when she was 7, but she just sort of went in this whole length of memories of her dad doting on her her memories up until age 6. And she spent a good 10 minutes describing what he looked like and really bringing him to life. And the joy on her face, and then other people just like, oh, you were so lucky to have him, and what a great man, thanks for sharing about it. So it's about finding joy and embracing it and knowing that that's going to carry over. And then they come back because they want more.
Right. That's great. That's so interesting. So you are a caregiver to your mom. 100.
Yes, and it has been quite a journey.
Experience.
Well, she drove until 92.
Okay.
Right? So she was pretty spry. I mean, she had a walker. She was getting by. But, around 90, we noticed she was slowing down. And, some of her friends were like, we're noticing. Have you noticed? And we're like, yeah, we're keeping an eye on it. We're trying to keep her as independent as possible. She got in a car accident in 92, and we were like, okay, you really shouldn't be driving. But still, she got around with the ride in Boston, which is, call them and pick you up. And she was able to schedule it. She was part of a book club at the temple and things like that. So she had activities and the senior center she went to, and she was keeping it all together. And then I started noticing around tax time, she couldn't do her taxes on her own. So the bills were going out on time, but the taxes were too much. So I would come in every year at tax time. And then COVID hit. And we ran to Boston. My sister, my nephew jumped in the car just as things were going to shut down, barreled up from New Jersey to, picked her up, packed her up, moved her to New Jersey with the idea of we just didn't want her there alone. My sister's retired. My sister, is a good caretaker. And so the thought was like, get her in a big house, nice and safe with family, not living alone. And when she was there, we really were able to see she would fall asleep sitting on the bed and slip off, some cognitive decline. We started noticing when she would, again, we're trying to get her to do all her own bills. She's writing a check and then ripping it up. And so she's like, it would take 6 checks to write 1 check. And so all of this, but it was the falling that we were like, oh, you can't go home. You have to stay here. So we found her in assisted living, which was pretty good for 3 years. She was part of the community. And then as people get older, things change. And her cognitive function really shifted this year. And so it was a UTI that started it. And so we noticed the confusion, but after that UTI, she never quite came back. Wow. And so this was all right about the time of her birthday. And so eventually they said, well, let's give it some more time. And then they said, we have a memory unit. And when we moved her into the memory unit, unfortunately they did not keep her safe. And so the memory unit itself was quite wonderful. And I was nervous about moving her in, but the activities were good and the community was good and a lot of cheerful people and visiting pets. But she was falling, I think, once a week.
Oh, God.
Yeah. And we were asking them, it was always late at night. She would wake up and not know what time of morning it was. I'm awake. It must be morning. So we had a nanny cam in there. It's 1:00 in the morning and she's getting herself dressed for the day. So we were like, all of the falls are taking place late at night. You got to check on her late at night. And they just didn't. So the last one was, I woke up one morning to check on my mom. She was on the floor and it's 6 a.m. And I called them to get her, looked at the video. She had gotten up at 1, got herself dressed, fell asleep in the wheelchair, slipped out. And so she had been on the floor from 1 to 6 with nobody checking on her. They came in, she was okay. They put her back in the chair and left her in the chair and said, somebody will come back to help you get dressed in just a moment. And then in the room, I watched in real time as she fell asleep again in the chair, hit her head and went splat. And she, in that fall, she injured her hip. It is the best broken hip story you ever heard because it's just a fracture. It's going to heal on its own. But you didn't lay her on the bed, so it was very upsetting. And we got her into a hospital. They checked her out. We put her into rehab. We found a rehab that we could transfer her to as a nursing home. And she's there now and has been there for over 2 months and has had one fall in 2 months, you know. So they're doing a much better job. There's an alarm on the bed, an alarm on the wheelchair. And so if she's getting up, they're hearing the bing, 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 and they know to come and check on her. So, so it's a transition and all of that. But it was very emotional for the family, having to search for things last minute. And I was talking to you before anybody was joining us about, finding the right support. And that was key. And the three support that we had was really good. My mother's primary care has a social worker. It's a geriatric assessment center. We talked with them. I found in Brooklyn that there's some place called Heights and Hills, which has caregiver support. And they've actually explained to me almost every city has some funding for caregiver support connected with elder support.
Right.
And some cities are better than others because I've had friends look in their cities in the Midwest and maybe not find what we did. Or in Missouri, they did find what we did, So each city is different, but the Brooklyn one is great. So they've assigned me a social worker who has walked me through, these are the questions to ask, this is what to look for, how to navigate issues, understanding my mother's emotional changes, how to cope when she's frustrated. She wants to go back to where she was before, right? That can't be done.
Right. So, they want to go back to the familiar and, things like that. So your struggles of going through that, what would you tell other caregivers? Because you've had kind of a journey. It's hard to find the right place for you. Some people look for the place that's closest. Some people look for the place that their doctor is associated with. Some for, places that say, have the greatest ads, on TV, like that. What would you say to specifically find the place for your parent?
I would say, first of all, a lot of it also depends on finances. My mom was lucky. The condo she owned gave her a certain amount of money, which meant that, she could go to a place that she could pay for. Eventually, they're very expensive. She ran out of money and now she's on Medicaid. But I would say understanding financially what you can do. We started working with an elder lawyer because we knew that she was going to be running out of money at some point. We knew this was only enough for about 3 years. And granted, she was already 97, but here she is at 100, right? So it's a kind of thing where we got recommendations from her primary care, from the elder lawyer, just looked things up online. And then we went to see, and we brought my mom with us. And I think my favorite place she felt looked like a hotel. So I thought this place looks great. And she's like, it doesn't look homey.
Yeah, homey. Yeah.
Yeah. And so the thing is that what I would choose and what she would choose are two different things. Mm-hmm. And then one thing that was big is the intake person, how they spoke. So there was one place that my mom liked, but we noticed the intake person talked to us and not to her. And so my mom fell asleep during the meeting, and then we woke her up, and the woman continued. And we even said, tell mom about it, tell Mona. And she continued to talk to us, and my mother fell asleep again. And at other facilities, there were people who talked to her and then brought us in. And my mother was wide awake. And we were like, that's key. Like, that's coming from management down. So we were looking for things like that. Did people look happy? We tried to come in during times where there might be some activities so we could see what was going on. Mm-hmm. And so, the first place we chose was actually great for years until there were changes with her, so I think it was also key. And then the one thing, with the Medicaid thing, there was the point of we had originally thought maybe we should bring her back, and maybe we had a long talk with them, and of course they were horrified and apologetic, and yes, there are changes we can make and that we should make. So they weren't callous. They were just, I think they were probably distracted by other things going on with other residents, There's probably more than one emergency going on at the same time is what I suspect was the bigger issue. And our lawyer said, you're looking to transition to Medicaid now. Right now, you can get her into a facility with rehab money, and that's going to be an incentive. If you send her back to this other place, she will likely fall again because you've been seeing she's falling so often. And if she really injures herself, you will no longer have this incentive of the rehab money, and that could put you in a far less desirable space. You found something you like. He said, you do what you have to do, but I'm promising you, we already have seen a track record of what's been going on there for the last couple of months. I don't see that it's going to change overnight, even though they know it needs to. You're safer putting her here. And now that she's there, there's also the point where we're learning that Medicaid will only, let's say she needed to go to the hospital, Medicaid will only pay for a certain amount of days, and then she loses the room. Mm-hmm. And then, so let's say she had a fall and had, they pay for heads on beds. So there's this thing of, these are things that we didn't know, right? We didn't know to ask the questions. And so now we realize here, if she goes to a hospital, she'll probably only be there for a week. If she needs rehab, if this place is already a rehab facility, they wouldn't even move her out of her room. They would just bring the rehab staff to her. So she's now in a place that can offer her the care she needs, no matter what level that is. And I would say, with the transition to Medicaid, that is far more important to us at this stage. Does this make sense?
No, it does. It does. But it just lets you know it's so many things to think about that you wouldn't normally think about. So sometimes you have to talk to a professional. You have to talk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that his name is Ryan Broadlin. If you're in New Jersey, I highly recommend him. He's incredible.
His name again?
Ryan Broadlin.
Okay.
Yeah. But I would say that Ryan really knew his stuff. And there was constantly saying, what are the questions we're not thinking to ask? Mm-hmm. And a lot of them actually surfaced when we got the contract to sign to move her into the agreement. That's where we learned about the Medicaid heads on beds thing. It's like nobody had thought to tell us that. And, they're not trying to hide anything. They're just professionals. They know this stuff, but it's like they don't know that you don't know. So I think that those agreements, they might be 40 pages long, but I think that reading through them will actually give insights to things that you should be concerned about. So that was a big one. Also through Atlantic Health and the Geriatric Assessment Center, they teach a couple of times a year for people in New Jersey, and it's free, Art of the Caregiver. Okay. And it covers self-care, caring for your elderly one, legal, which is how we actually met Ryan. He was leading the legal, cognitive issues, and end of life. So it was a 5-session class over 5 days. But we found out all of these mistakes we had made. It's like, oh, I wish I'd known that ahead of time. And so I think there is the thing of, as, for example, my mom needed help with her, some investments had not gone well in 2008. So her finances changed. So we started helping her right around 2015 with her mortgage. And with the agreement, once I sell this place, of course, I'll pay you all back. Great. So we're helping her with a mortgage every month. We did not realize if we were going to eventually need Medicaid that would be looked at as gifting because we had not written a contract. We hadn't had it notarized or any of that. Nothing. And so that was one of the bigger concerns is you did this the wrong way. And we are not convinced that we're going to be able to prove to Medicaid that you should be paid back. And Ryan worked some magic, had us draft a letter. We had the letter notarized. He wrote a description. We didn't need just the 5-year look back on my mom. We needed the 5-year look back on all the siblings. So it quadrupled our paperwork. Wow. But he managed to get that approved. And, to a certain degree, it's like all that money is probably going to go back to my mom, but there's this thing of being able to pay back this lump sum, whether it goes to me or whether it goes to her, it's money that we can use as opposed to money that's seen as gifting when it was never officially gifting. It was always in support of her.
Mhm. Wow, wow. Yeah. Yeah, that things that we don't know. So it's amazing. I love what you do with the storytelling and things like that. It's so important. And we like to encourage families to get the stories now.
Yeah.
know?
I agree. I mean, before we just tie it up, I would say that, if you have relatives that are getting older, finding out the information you need to know earlier is good. Um, However you do that, wherever you do that, AARP, what suggestions do they make? But just little things like my brother who's also 77, he had a terrible car accident. He came out of it fine, but it was like, what if he had been unconscious for a long time? And we realized we didn't know the name of his landlord. We didn't have keys to his place. We wouldn't know where his important papers were. His bills would not have gotten paid. And so we found a list online of things that potential caregivers should have. So I don't have the keys to his place, but I know his landlord's name. I have my sister and I both got power of attorney on him. So there's a power of attorney. And so there's just that thing of if something were to go wrong, I would know where to find things. I would know who to call. And because I have power of attorney, I could pay his bills until he was back together. But, so it's like, it's as people get older or have health issues, it's getting that stuff set up, looking that up and looking at it before, just so that you have a gist of it. Even if it's overwhelming, like, oh, I'm going to have to get this, and this, at least you know what it is,
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing your story and for the work that you do. I think it's important to encourage people to tell their stories, and also it helps the older adults to feel like they're contributing. They're still contributing to life and societies, and that they are interesting and they are important, and it helps them with their health. It helps them with overall, so that's
as it helps with morale, with people with cognitive function, depending on where it is. It helps them remember things. One gentleman that we work with, I would leave and then he had a caregiver and he would talk to that caregiver for hours. And his daughter said that every time we came in and did an oral history with him, he was far more engaged and talkative through the rest of the day. And so it brings them out of their shell. There's also that point where if there are other concerns, whether it be health, whether it be worries, it's like, no, now is not the time. This is the time to celebrate your life and your experiences. And with the understanding, we're going to share this with moving forward. So, I'll never know what my relatives in the 1850s thought or felt. But, 100, 200 years from now, everything's digitized. We're going to be able to do that. So it's really creating a legacy for your family. I do have some tips, and that is if you do it yourself, number one, I always recommend, when possible, bring in somebody who's never heard the stories.
okay.
Because your relative, especially if there's even a little bit of cognitive decline, it's hard to imagine the one listening through the recording device, So it's having somebody brand new, and they're going to have to really tell the story about
Right.
That kind of thing. So that's, when possible, bring in someone that they trust, or if it's a stranger. One thing that I recommend for starting when there's a stranger in the room is start with legacy stories from the families before. Family members, because it's not as personal. And so that's like a nice way to sort of develop the rapport and share some really, really important things without feeling too raw or impersonal. Get a sense for the people that love to share versus, well, that feels a little private. I don't feel the need to share that, or I don't want to, and don't push. I think that with the questions, going in knowing what questions you might want to ask. If there's a story you've heard in the past, like, oh, I really want them to talk about, Woodstock again, or whatever it is, having those jotted down. And questions should be directed to a moment in time. Saying, tell me what it's like when you were a kid. I know, it was good. My parents were great. It's going to get a general question is going to get a general answer. Tell me how you met your best friend. What was a favorite game or sport that you excelled in? Can you describe your family house to me in your bedroom from when you were little?
Specifics.
Is there a great piece of advice you got from your mom or your dad or your grandfather? Things that's going to make them think of dialogue or describing pictures with their words are going to get much more richer things.
Okay.
And then finally, if they're tired, let them be tired. I usually slot 2 hours knowing it'll probably be an hour, but I don't want to cut them off if they're on a roll. And I don't want to drag it out if they're exhausted.
Right.
And for equipment, the last one, I did jot this down. Equipment, cell phones are amazing these days. So just a cell phone should be fine. Audio and cell phones are great. And in fact, with the new iPhone, you can record phone calls. So you can call somebody and record the story right there. If you want to do video, some people hate video, some people love video. I would just say set it up before the interview, because the setting it up and the setting the lights and all of that stuff can be exhausting for some people. So set up the space and then bring them in.
Okay.
Those are my tips.
Great advice. Thanks for your tips. Well, really appreciate you taking time, sharing your information with Autumn here, and this is very encouraging information. And I just like that you're out there, paying it forward. You are a caregiver, but you're actually out there paying it forward. So that's really great. So thank you again for coming on to our show and just sharing your information.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Take care. Bye-bye.